When a massive warship boldly enters a restricted zone, in the standoff between gun barrels and dignity, who truly controls the waves of the East China Sea? On August the 10th, a report by Japan's Kyodo news agency sent shockwaves through the calm waters, exactly 381 days earlier. On the morning of July the 4th, 2024, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force destroyer or YG entered Chinese territorial waters off Zhejiang Province. The Chinese Navy's modern-class destroyer responded with 2 volleys from its AK-130 ship-mounted guns, their roar splitting the sea surface. The massive waves nearly crashed against the Japanese ship's windows. This marked the first instance since the end of the Cold War of a nation conducting live fire, warning shots against a foreign warship in East Asian waters. The news immediately sparked outrage online in Japan, with cries of warfare and China must apologize echoing across the internet. However, what was intriguing was that Japan's top officials, from the Prime Minister's office to the Ministry of Defense, fell into an eerie silence. The officials who had personally disciplined 218 JMSDF personnel and replaced the ship's captain remained collectively silent. This crisis, which had been deliberately swept under the rug, was now thrust into the eye of the media storm, and it was no coincidence. The Ningbo warship, which carried out the warning shots, is equipped with Russian-made AK-130 twin-barreled naval guns, dubbed the steel behemoth of the Western Pacific. Each single turret gun weighs 94 tons, and its terrifying rate of fire of 140 rounds per minute can unleash 1.5 tons of ammunition onto the shore in 30 seconds, creating a deadly fire zone the size of a football field. What truly terrifies the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force is the upgraded fire control system. The Sea Eagle-S radar installed in 2023 reduces the accuracy of shell impact points to within 50 meters, creating an overwhelming visual deterrent while precisely avoiding substantial damage. This perfect balance of demonstrative use of force has been praised by the Geneva-based International Association of Legal Scholars as a technological revolution in 21st-century territorial sea rights protection. While the RYH class is equipped with the SSM anti-aircraft missiles, its maximum range of 50 kilometers pales in comparison to the Hongqi 9 system on China's Type 052D destroyers, the latter's 120-kilometer beyond visual range strike radius, combined with its 64-cell vertical launch system, utterly outclasses the Akazuki-class 32-cell system, exposing a stark generational gap in the East China Sea standoff. When 2 J-16 fighters armed with YJ-12 anti-ship missiles approached simultaneously, the Japanese warship's radar warning system sounded a piercing alarm, exposing the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force's most fatal weakness. Without regional air superiority, a destroyer is nothing more than a floating steel coffin. The artillery attack was like a giant boulder dropped into the deep sea, yet it triggered an eerie silence that lingered for 381 days at the heart of Japan's power structure. Behind this collective silence lies a strategic dilemma, as complex as a triple noose. Legally, Japan's claim to innocent passage rights is untenable in light of the 1946 Corfu Channel case ruling by the International Court of Justice, where Albania's warning shots against a British cruiser that had entered its waters without authorization were unanimously upheld as lawful by the court. Ironically, Article 17 of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces Operations Manual explicitly states that the boundaries of neighboring countries' territorial waters must be manually verified on nautical charts. Yet the RYG ship's log shows that the on-duty officer failed to perform even basic positioning operations. The diplomatic dilemma is like walking a tightrope. While the Ishihara administration pushed for a record-high trade volume of $378 billion between China and Japan in 2025, the Pentagon was pressuring Japan to clearly take sides in the Taiwan Strait conflict. Tokyo's strategic ambiguity in quietly notifying Japanese companies in Taiwan to prepare evacuation plans coincided with the U.S. promise to reduce tariffs on Japanese automobiles from 27.5% to 15%, becoming a hollow pledge. At this time, conservative factions exploited the artillery incident to send a declaration of loyalty against China to Washington. The most critical issue is the military dilemma. Japan's Ministry of Defense revised the blockade function of the first island chain to deterrence value in its 2025 annual report, reflecting the largest strategic retreat in 2 decades. As China's dual-carrier task force broke through the second island chain this summer, the Liaoning Carrier Strike Group disappeared for 7 days in late May, 1,800 kilometers east of Iwo Jima, when Japanese reconnaissance aircraft Ray located it. The escort fleet had surged from 4 to 8 ships, including 2 Type 055 destroyers with 384 vertical launch cells, This 300,000-ton steel armada now surpasses the total tonnage of France's active duty navy. On August 10, 2025, Kyodo News' sudden time bomb was no accident. A week earlier, Minister of Economic Revitalization Akira Kazawa returned home empty-handed with only a verbal commitment from the US on tariffs. When asked by reporters for a specific timeline, he evaded the question, saying, "It's up to the US to decide," causing the Liberal Democratic Party's approval rating to plummet to a record low of 20.4%. Meanwhile, the number of seats held by the opposition party advocating Japanese first had tripled, urgently needing to shift the focus to external conflicts. Right-wing media precisely manipulated the narrative balance. They sensationalized the threat with claims like a single shot from an AK-130 can punch a bathtub-sized hole in steel plates, while concealing key facts such as the Ryūgō closing its eyes system and ignoring 7 radio warnings, emphasizing the humiliation of seawater splashing into the cockpit, while completely ignoring the provocative nature of the Japanese ship continuing to sail within Japanese territorial waters for 20 minutes before withdrawing. This kind of public opinion manipulation has a precedent. In March 2025, Kyodo News Agency hyped up the false news of Japanese ships crossing the Taiwan Strait, and in 2020, it manipulated the vote on a statement regarding Hong Kong. This time, the real target is Ishihara Shigeru's policy of easing tensions with China, as negotiations for the Japan-South Korea-China Free Trade Agreement enter a critical phase, and as the Kyushu Shinkansen adopts Chinese tunnel boring machines to save 4.7 billion yen in costs. The old news of the shelling has become a poisonous dagger aimed at economic cooperation. The 3 firsts created by the Ryūgō incident, Japanese warships entering Chinese territorial waters without notification, receiving live fire warnings, and triggering a systemic international legal battle, resemble the ceremonial handover of power in the Western Pacific. As the United States, Japan, the United Kingdom, and Australia launched joint military exercises centered on the aircraft carriers HMS Prince of Wales and USS Washington, Japan's Kaga light aircraft carrier successfully conducted its first F-35B takeoffs and landings with British and American aircraft, while the Chinese and Russian fleets were transiting the Tsushima Strait. This historic battlefield where the Russian Second Pacific Fleet was defeated in 1905 now saw Russian warships equipped with Zircon hypersonic missiles and Chinese Type 055 destroyers patrolling the waters. The overlapping steel silhouettes of warships and historical trajectories form the sharpest geopolitical declaration. The era when old maritime hegemonies relied on the sheer number of warships for deterrence is being reshaped by comprehensive situational awareness and legal authority. China's submission of a 300-page evidence chain to the International Hydrographic Organization, including satellite maps of the Liang'ao destroyer's trajectory, radio warning recordings, and baseline survey data for territorial waters, sets a new standard for coastal nations asserting their rights. Meanwhile, a secret report from Japan's Ministry of Defense reveals that the Ikazuki-class destroyer's air defense fire network has a survival probability of less than 17% when facing the terminal 10 Mach dive of the YJ-18 missile. The waves will eventually subside, but the red lines drawn on the nautical charts have become ironclad rules. Former Japanese ambassador to China Shuho Tsurumi advocates strategic patience to wait for China's decline, but he has forgotten the fate of the Pacific Fleet in 1945. When Trump publicly declared we do not seek conflict with China, and when the barrels of the AK-130 guns cooled in the morning mist over the East China Sea, the reckless gamble on national fortune pursued by certain factions will ultimately be exposed on the dual chopping blocks of strength and rules. Those 2 cannon blasts were both a declaration and a measure. They declared the end of an era where naval artillery was used to expand territories, and measured the distance between each player and their true strength in the midst of a century of change. After all, the shift in maritime power has never depended on the loudness of one's voice, but on who can forge their will into the silent reef, at the crest of the waves in the midst of turbulent seas.